The UCU strikes commenced today, and Fuse News came down to speak to some of the strikers and their supporting students about their demands and visions for the future. The key demands of the strikes are an end to casualisation and the pay gap. So this is of course a national strike action. Could you explain what the demands of the strike are?
Yes, so the demands are quite simple. The demands are give us back the 35% that universities took from our pension during the pandemic. It wasn't required then, and the scheme's in health to pay it back. Pay people a proper pay rise. At the minute, we've had the offer of a 3% pay offer. During a cost of living crisis when inflation is way above 10, it's not enough. When we've had our pay cut by 25%, it's definitely not enough. But the issue, and we've literally just been talking about it here, which affects everyone the most, is unbearably high workloads. You know, working every night, working most weekends as a routine, and also the extent of casualisation in the sector. We have 90,000 people in higher education on fixed term contracts. That's a third of academic staff. So when people are pointing out, and rightly so, that this is disruptive to students, it is disruptive to students to not know who your lecturer is next semester. It's disruptive to students to have staff who don't know if they can, afford to come into work because they can't pay their rent and they're living in their overdraft. And students need to know that unfortunately for far too many people, that's life working at a university, and you shouldn't be paying money anyway. Our union's position is that students should go to university for free, but the minute you're paying tens of thousands of pounds for a system that only runs by exploiting staff, the status quo is not sustainable.
That's interesting. You've talked a lot about how it's also, as other people spoke about, how it's affecting the students and how the students' concerns are being taken into consideration.
Yeah.
What would you say, do you think you'll reach a resolution?
So my hope very much is that we'll reach a resolution. University Vice-Chancellors are some of the most intransigent, bullying employers in the country. They're threatening our members with docking pay for just not working over their contract when they come back after strike action. Some of them earn £500,000 themselves, but are saying that we should accept a 25% pay cut. And the sector has £40 billion of reserves. So there is enough money to fix all of the problems that we say exist. We would actually say to students, if you want to see this dispute resolved quickly, come and join us, demonstrate with us. Let your Vice-Chancellor know that you know it's them who's to blame and them who can resolve it, not the people stood here with me.
And if students can't come down to strike, how could they support the strike otherwise?
So there's loads of things students could do. You write to your VC, support us in other ways. There's lots of digital campaigning that we are doing. Be vocal about your support. If you are silent, even if you kind of, personally agree, your voice will be co-opted. People in the media will talk about students, your Vice-Chancellor will talk about students, people who want to oppose the strikes will. So be vocal. You might not be able to get here, but, students have their own networks online. Get out there, tell people what's happening, and demand better for education.
One final question. What would you say to those students, you touched upon this earlier, who are considering crossing the picket line? What would you say to them, who might not be convinced? What would you say to them?
I would say your staff, whether they're the librarian, whether they're a teaching associate, whether they're the person in your office doing the administration or your lecturer, they've probably trained for years to do this job. They love this job, they love this sector, they wouldn't be stood here if they thought there was another way. So if you want to see campus life return to normal, and if you want the best for you, don't cross the picket line, do something more productive with that energy, which helps us solve the dispute.
Wonderful, that's everything I want to ask, but thank you.
What is the SU going to do to help the students during this time?
So the Students' Union Advice Centre is what I'd say should be people's first port of call. They're open from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday, except on Thursdays when they're open 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. And they are specialised in dealing with academic inquiries. So if you're finding that your studies are being impacted by strikes significantly, if you need to look at submitting a mitigating circumstances request, or if you need any help making an appeal, then the Advice Centre is there for you. Please come chat to us in the office at any time as well. We're always, we're all ears here. We're also doing teach outs today, tomorrow, and on Wednesday next week during the last day of strikes. So come along, chat to your lecturers who are striking, find out about the history of industrial action here at the university. But by all means, come chat to me, message me on Instagram, drop me an email. Always happy to hear.
Okay. So this year's student union decided to take a stance pro the UCU strikes. Last year's student union didn't. So obviously the execs change every year, but what changed this year that Yes.
So I think this year as officers we've been keeping a keen eye on national events. I think you'll have seen with the £9 million that we got for all students that we're trying to really stay ahead of the kind of the national mood and trying to really try and lead that. And I think this year, we went to the Enough is Enough campaign rallies earlier in the year. We've spoken quite extensively with our UCU branch as well. And I think this year is really the year when we are at breaking point. This is about the future of higher education. We've also got policy passed at Senate in February of this year supporting strikes. Senate's now become Union Assembly, and in February of next semester you can come and vote on the issue of strikes again, so please come and engage with that. That'll be early February. I think it's really about just listening to the branch, listening to the national mood, listening to our students as well. This is about the future of higher education. It's impacting our studies right now, and that is painful, but ultimately what do we want higher education to look like in 10 years' time? Do we want grab-and-go degrees for the wealthy that are just going to reproduce inequalities and reinforce privilege, or do we want institutions that are actually going to serve society, serve students, and serve staff?
All right. Finally, some of like you touched upon it, some of the students have seen disruptions throughout the academic year, all 3 academic years for some of them. If these strikes keep going on, some of them will see disruptions leading up to their dissertation season, and sometimes when they need to talk to the lecturers. What can the student union do then at that point to help the students?
So one of the things that we're keeping a keen eye on at the minute is the marking and assessment boycott. So we saw last academic year that at some universities that caused carnage. Luckily, this university is very experienced through COVID of making sure that people's studies aren't too affected by disruption. Obviously, there's not really any such thing as a normal year for a university student at this point. None of us know a normal year. And none of the students who've just started will know a normal year either. Unfortunately, that's where we're at in the world right now, and that's not just a higher education thing, that's just a across the nation thing. But in terms of what we're doing to support students for continued strike action, we're keeping a keen eye on the marking and assessment boycott, working with the university to mitigate against how that might impact people's studies, people's ability to gain marks, graduate. So we're keeping a close eye on it. It's very much a moving conversation. If the situation changes, if students come to us and come have a chat, we'll always listen. We'll take it on board. As I say, we've got Union Assembly in February, so that's going to be a really good chance to have an open discussion with all of our students. So my plea would be come and have a chat.
Good morning, guys. Today we're going to speak to Fuse News. What motivated you to come down to the strike today?
We have got a couple of fights. We are fighting with the employers today for a long time now. Obviously, I'm a person of colour. And we know the differences between, I suppose, pay and between working conditions as well. We know that there are massive issues of pay, massive issues in terms of working conditions. Some staff members, I've been throughout the whole system, if you want to put it that way, from a PhD student right up till being a lecturer, and I know that things are not great sometimes. I know that pay and working conditions are under threat. I know my union is trying to do its best to try to get us a better deal, and I know that we have massive economic or macroeconomic conditions right now regarding, for example, the cost of living crisis in that sense. So I'm here today because I think it's important we take a stand. I think it's important we do that with students as well, and we know that students are suffering as well, so we do care. But we also have to protect our working conditions as well. And so it's important that we stand united against the employers. So it's not just this university and staff going on strike at this university, it's across the country. So it's a national issue. That's why I'm here today.
Fantastic. And what might you say to students? Of course, students are very much suffering with the cost of living crisis. What might you say to those who are considering crossing the picket line, who might want to continue going to lecture things? What would you say to them?
I mean, I haven't got anything against anyone that crosses the picket line at all. I haven't. I also understand the position they're in as well. I only hope that they would see our viewpoint. I only hope that they'll pick up the literature we hand them on the picket line and they'll read about it and they'll sympathise with us. I only hope that I suppose they're going to be the future workers as well. That of course that when they do go into work in future, that they do join organisations like unions that would support them and support them against employers that would want to subject them to sort of worse working conditions, or indeed pay rises that are not inflationary at the inflationary rate in that sense. So if an employer says I'll give you a 5% pay rise and the inflation's at 10%, you work it out. That's a real terms pay cut, isn't it?
What motivated you to come down and support the strike today?
Well, the university employers have been degrading our pay, and in particular, as far as I'm concerned, the pensions. There's a huge row that we've been having with the universities at a national level over whether over the valuation of the pensions, which I guess that young people don't quite get, but it's incredibly significant. My pension's going to be okay, but for many of the younger academics here, their pensions are being savagely attacked, and a pension is simply a delayed salary. It's what you don't get paid, but they put into a pot, and they've been reducing that, and it's absolutely terrible.
I'm a research only member of staff, and across the UK, as my sign says, 68% of research-only staff are on these fixed-term contracts, which make it really difficult to plan your life, difficult to settle in an area, difficult to particularly when you want to start a family, think about those kind of things. So it really damages your life in a massive way. We're also striking over pay. We've been offered a 3% pay rise, which you might think that sounds great, but as I'm sure you're all aware, there's about 12% inflation at the moment. We've also not really been receiving pay rises in line with inflation for the last 25 years, which I think means since 2009 our real term pay has dropped by about 25% to now. So what we were being paid in 2009 would have gone 25% further. The other issues we're striking over are to do with universities' general inaction on equalities issues. So there's a lot of inequity for academic staff. Women and BAME staff are paid, I think on average, around don't quote me on this, do check these numbers, I think about 16% less than their white and male colleagues in kind of equivalent roles. And there's really not been much action on this or kind of interest in this from universities as employers generally. So we're striking on all those issues. I think I've covered.
Okay, good morning. So you're here supporting the strike. What prompted you to come down today in support of the lecturers?
I mean, fundamentally, I do believe in strike action, and I believe in what it's gained us. And I think that in terms of like the smaller picture, as in like my university education, like it is ridiculous to imagine that my lecturers, who are the people I see every day, the people who mark my work, the people who teach me, should be on uncertain contracts, should be underpaid. I just find it horrendous, especially considering the problems associated with the management of the university and the large salaries that they are associated with. And I just want some of that money to go to the people who actually do the teaching.
That's very interesting, very interesting. So of course it's a good turnout this morning. Are you hoping to see it grow into something larger? Are you hoping to see it become a larger strike?
Yes, I imagine. I mean, every year it feels like we get more people, so hopefully this time it'll be massive, and if it needs to be massive next time, it'll be massive next time.
And are you at all worried about the impact to your education? You know, of course, I mean, we're the years that have been impacted by COVID, and there've been a lot of strikes. Are you at all worried about that?
I would consider myself far more worried about the impact of my lecturers of being like overworked and stressed on my education, honestly. I think they are far more capable of delivering quality education if they have proper pay, proper pensions, proper contracts, proper tenures. I just think that we need to think big picture about this. We need to think about the state of our education in general and about the people who are coming after us, and not just our own education.
Very interesting. So obviously you think that the labour conditions, these contracts, this precarity they spoke about up there, you think that's having an impact on students' quality of education at the University of Manchester?
Absolutely. I mean, no one does their job fantastic when they're stressed and panicked and overworked, and lecturers are working a lot of hours beyond what they're paid. Tenured professors are paid a certain amount of hours, and in order to correct like exams and things and essays, they do have to work more to get it out in time. So I know that there is I don't have numbers on me, but there is a high amount of higher education workers who are suffering from mental illness as a result of workload, and I just don't see that as humane. And that's like the idea that it's going to affect my education is the last of my concerns, the first being their quality of life.
And what would your advice be to students across the country, not just in Manchester, who are starting university going forward? What would you say to them?
I would say pay attention to the way your university treats staff. If you're at one of the 35 universities at the minute that are threatening to take 100% of their staff's pay for simply not rescheduling teaching cancelled during the strike action, write to your Vice-Chancellor, say you're not going to tolerate this. Ask what goes on beyond the time you spend with staff. Because ultimately, you are going to go into the world of work when you finish, and you're probably going to have the same problems we have.